You wake up and something feels slightly off. Not dramatically wrong, nothing you could easily point to. Just a quiet shift in your mood, a subtle heaviness in your chest, a lack of clarity that seems to blur your thoughts before they even fully form. You assume it's your mind, maybe stress, maybe something you ate, maybe nothing at all. But what if that feeling didn't start in your brain? What if it started somewhere lower, deeper, in a place you don't usually associate with thought, emotion, or decision-making? What if, before your brain even had a chance to interpret your day, another system had already influenced how you would feel about it? Inside your body, wrapped around your digestive system like a dense, living network, there is a structure made up of over 100 million neurons. Not metaphorically similar to a brain, not loosely connected to one, but structurally and functionally complex enough that scientists refer to it as the enteric nervous system. It doesn't think in words, it doesn't form opinions, it doesn't plan your future, but it processes information, reacts to stimuli, communicates with your central nervous system, and most importantly, it influences your emotional state in ways that are far more direct than most people realize. This is what people mean when they say you have a second brain. And unlike the brain in your skull, this one operates mostly in silence. No inner voice, no conscious awareness, no sense of identity attached to it. Yet it is constantly active, constantly evaluating, constantly signaling. It doesn't wait for your permission. It doesn't ask for your interpretation. It sends information upward, shaping the tone of your thoughts before those thoughts even fully exist. If you imagine your body not as a hierarchy with the brain in absolute control, but as a network of systems constantly negotiating with each other, the picture starts to shift. The gut isn't just receiving instructions, it's sending them. It's not passive, it's participating. And the conversation between your gut and your brain is not subtle or occasional. It's continuous, rapid, and deeply influential. One of the main pathways of this communication is something called the vagus nerve, a long, wandering nerve that connects your brainstem to multiple organs, including your gut. It acts like a highway of information, carrying signals in both directions. But here's the important detail. The majority of those signals are traveling from the gut to the brain, not the other way around. That means your brain is constantly being updated by your gut, receiving information about your internal state, your digestion, your microbiome, your inflammation levels, and translating that into what you experience as mood, energy, and even motivation. This is where things start to feel less intuitive, because we're used to thinking of emotions as something that originate in the brain, something psychological, something tied to thoughts and experiences. But a large part of what you feel is biochemical. It's physical, it's systemic, and it's influenced by processes happening far outside your conscious awareness. When your gut environment shifts, your brain doesn't just observe that change, it reacts to it. Inside your digestive system, there are trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, all forming what is known as the gut microbiome. This ecosystem is not random or irrelevant. It plays a role in digestion, immune function, and crucially, the production of neurotransmitters. Serotonin, often associated with mood and well-being, is produced in large quantities in the gut. Not all of it directly reaches the brain, but it influences the signaling environment, the way your nervous system communicates, the baseline tone of your internal state. So when people talk about feeling off, feeling anxious for no clear reason, feeling low energy despite having slept enough, it's not always a story that starts in the mind. Sometimes it starts in the body, in subtle imbalances that shift the signals being sent upward, altering how the brain interprets everything else. Imagine your brain as a prediction machine, constantly trying to make sense of incoming information, trying to construct a coherent version of reality. It relies heavily on internal signals to do this. Not just what you see and hear, but what you feel inside your body. If those internal signals are slightly distorted, slightly dysregulated, the brain adjusts its interpretation. It doesn't know the source is the gut. It simply assumes that the feeling must be about your life, your situation, your future. This is how a physiological shift can become a psychological narrative. A subtle change in your gut environment can lead to a shift in your baseline emotional state, and your brain, trying to make sense of that state, starts generating thoughts that match it. You don't just feel different, you start thinking differently. The world looks slightly more negative, slightly more overwhelming, slightly less rewarding. What's fascinating is that this process often happens without any clear trigger that you can identify. You might not have had a bad day, nothing obvious went wrong, but internally something shifted, and your brain adapted to that shift. It filled in the gaps with meaning, with interpretation, with a story that feels personal, even though its origin is partly biological. This doesn't mean your thoughts aren't real or meaningful. It means they're influenced by a deeper layer of your physiology, one that operates continuously beneath the surface. And once you start to see that, the relationship between your body and your mind becomes less linear and more circular. Your thoughts can affect your gut can affect your thoughts, and both are constantly feeding into each other. Stress is one of the clearest examples of this loop. When you experience stress, your body shifts into a different state. Digestion slows down, blood flow is redirected, inflammatory processes can increase. Over time, this affects the environment of your gut, which in turn affects the signals being sent back to the brain. The result is a feedback loop where stress changes your physiology, and that changed physiology makes you more prone to feeling stressed. It's not just a mental loop, it's a biological one. And this is why the idea of the second brain matters. Not because it replaces the brain in your head, but because it adds another layer to how you understand yourself. It explains why sometimes you can't simply think your way out of a feeling, why logic doesn't immediately override anxiety, why your mood can feel stubborn and resistant to change. It's not just about changing your thoughts, it's about understanding the system that's generating the conditions for those thoughts. If you zoom out, what you start to see is a more integrated version of the human body, one where boundaries between systems are less rigid than we tend to assume. The gut is not just for digestion, the brain is not just for thinking, and the line between physical and emotional becomes less clear. Your experience of being you is the result of multiple systems interacting, influencing each other in real time. And yet, despite how complex this system is, it often expresses itself in very simple ways. A feeling of calm, a sense of unease, a sudden drop in energy, a shift in motivation. These are the surface level experiences of deeper processes, signals rising from within, being translated into something you can feel and recognize. The interesting part is not just that your gut influences your brain, but that this influence is ongoing, dynamic, and responsive. It changes based on what you eat, how you sleep, how you handle stress, how your body interacts with the environment. It's not fixed, it's constantly adapting, which means your internal state is not static either. It's being shaped moment by moment, not just by your thoughts, but by your biology. And once you understand that, the idea of control becomes more nuanced. It's not about forcing your mind into a different state. It's about influencing the systems that contribute to that state. There's a quiet shift that happens when you start to see yourself this way, less as a mind trapped in a body, and more as a system, an ecosystem even, where different parts are constantly communicating, constantly influencing the overall experience. The second brain is not a separate entity. It's part of that system, a deeply integrated component that adds complexity to how you feel, think, and respond to the world. And maybe the most surprising part is how much of this happens without you ever noticing. There's no clear signal that says, this feeling came from your gut, no obvious marker that separates one source from another. It all blends together into a single experience, one that feels unified even though it's built from multiple layers. So the next time something feels slightly off, slightly different, slightly harder to explain, it might not be just in your head. It might be deeper than that, part of a conversation happening inside you, one that's been going on long before you became aware of it, and one that will continue, quietly shaping your experience moment by moment. I post videos that break down how reality actually works, from your brain to your body to the world around you. So if that sounds interesting, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.